What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative. Today, I have a question for you all. Have you ever started reading a book and you thought immediately you don't like it, you may even hate it, and you feel quite certain you're going to DNF it, but you want to give it at least 1 to 3 chapters before making that final call, and then the magic happens and you end up loving that book? Okay, I'm going to confess to you all, that hasn't happened a whole lot to me over the years. I was thinking about it because in a video that I filmed last week, I was talking about, I started reading this book, I thought I was going to hate it, and then I ended up loving it, and it's become one of my favorite books now. And when I said that aloud, it triggered another book that I recently read that happened to me. And then I thought, well, now wait a minute, here's an idea. I'm going to put this aside, finish filming whatever it was I was filming, and then I'm going to actually think about that more in depth. And I thought about it, and I came up with 5 books over the last 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer, that I read, I started out reading, thought I was going to hate it, DNF it, and ended up loving it. And my question for you all is, when you're not enjoying a book from the beginning, do you give it a certain amount of time, say 50 pages, 5 chapters? What's your unit of measurement before you make the final decision of this book is not for me? I would love for you to put that down in the comments below. But now let's just jump into the 5 books that I have chosen here that I want to talk to you about in regards to this topic. And the first one I have here is Alex E. Harrow's The 10 Doors of January. I got 130 pages into this one before I fell in love. Prior to what happened to the character that changed it for me, I just could not connect to January. I could not relate to her in any way. There wasn't anything about her that I just loved or was attracted to as far as a character. But then at that 130 page mark, something happened to her that endeared her to me, that I could relate to and sympathize or even empathize with, depending on how you look at it. And I was in love at that point, and this has become a favorite book for me. And I've bought everything Alex E. Harrow has put out since, but I haven't read any of it yet. But I have it here. I'm going to read it. But this one, if you haven't read it, it is what I would call a portal fantasy. A little girl named January has an interesting way of escaping her reality and slipping into someone else's. And through the course of doing this, she is trying to find or learn more about her parents who died when she was very, very young. And it's such a great story. I just absolutely loved it. Just loved it. Plus, the cover is gorgeous. Look how beautiful that is. I mean, you just can't be mad having that one on your shelf. The next one, I bet a lot of you are going to shake your head yes, that you agree with me here. Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I was so confused. I had no idea what was happening, but my curiosity was awakened. I had to know. I had so many different theories about what was going on in this one, and that just kept me engaged, wanting to read more. I loved how even when I wasn't reading this book, I was thinking about it, trying to come up with what I actually thought was going on, and I never quite figured it out. I really want to reread it now that I know how it ends, see if there were signs that pointed to what was really happening and I just missed them or misinterpreted them. But it is the story of a person named Piranesi, and Piranesi lives in this house that is a labyrinth. It has several different floors, many rooms, and he has spent many years mapping out this house. He knows when there are certain floors going to be flooded by a tide, when the rains will come. There are statues in different rooms, and there seems to be only one other person that Piranesi ever comes in contact with, and he actually calls him the Other. And it is just a wild tale, because you know that there's something else here. You're just not certain what it is. It's so good. But I say that after the fact because I finished it. When I began this book, I thought, this is going to be a little too weird, too out there, I thought, is this going to not make sense the entirety of the novel? Am I going to be left not knowing what actually went on, where I will just be sitting here to infinity coming up with all of these ideas about what I think was going on? I don't mind when an author has me forming my own opinions and theories. I don't like if I don't get enough information to actually know what's going on. And then if the author leaves me with an ending that leaves me hanging, that will infuriate me. I've gotten better about that though. I've grown to actually appreciate that in some cases. But in this one, I knew if I wasn't told what was actually happening, I would be really upset. Fortunately, I was told, and I really, really loved how that came about and what was happening. So good, so good. So that's 2 books down. We have 3 left, and these other 3 were very recent reads. And because I read them so close together, that's what made me realize, hey, sometimes I really hate the beginning of a book, but I end up loving it. Now, the next one here, The Last Smile of Sunder City by Luke Arnold. And now, the reason why this one made the list, it's an urban fantasy with no magic. And I thought, am I gonna like this? And I also thought, am I ruined from reading the Dresden Files for years? And because there's no magic and I'm going to constantly be comparing Fetch Phillips to Harry Dresden, like how is that gonna work? Well, fortunately, Fetch Phillips is not a wizard. He's not a magic user, never was. And I actually really latched onto that element. I really liked it a lot. He was just a man. And he wasn't a detective, a private investigator. He was a man for hire, meaning you have a job, you need a man for it, he's your guy. Now, it does so happen in this particular one, he is hired to locate a missing person. Or should I say missing vampire? Or should I say missing former vampire? We begin this one in Sunder City, 6 years after the Coda, which was an event where magic was accidentally destroyed and removed from the world, just drained away. And that's where I thought, I'm not gonna like this if nobody has magic. But I was wrong, and here's why. The magic was gone. The beings who had magic were still there. And I thought, okay, this could be interesting. What happens to a vampire when they are no longer immortal and they no longer need blood to live? They don't just go back to being normal humans. What happens to a siren when she no longer has her song to lure others into her grasp? You know, what about the witches, the wizards, the centaurs, the satyrs? What happens to these beings? This one was really funny because it took my prejudices, the things that I thought I was going to hate about it, and made me actually the most interested in those things. And that is just amazing in my opinion. Next up on this list is S.A. Chakraborty's The City of Brass. Now, it's just this one of the trilogy because once I finished this one, I was all in for the trilogy and ended up loving it. It's one of my favorite trilogies. But when I started The City of Brass, right in the very beginning, we get a little bit of insta-love and a potentially steamy scene that I thought was going to lead to more, and I just wasn't looking for that. I was looking for a Middle Eastern inspired fantasy about jinn. That's what I wanted. That was what I was here for. I was not here for this other mess. Fortunately, I had met another character that I absolutely loved with every fiber of my being, so I kept going, and I'm glad that I did, because that little fogging up the windows scene that happened was the only one that happened, and I just ended up head over heels in love with the story. Now, for those of you who have been around the channel a while, you know I start 1 to 2 new series a month, and I hardly ever finish series, or it takes me a long time. This is a trilogy that I started and finished this year. Recently. That is saying something. I want to say I started the series in April and I finished it in June. Yeah, that's crazy for me. Loved it. It's the story of a con woman named Nari, and she makes her living in the streets of Cairo by selling a con. Well, she's always had knowledge of this language that she never knew where it came from. When they found her as a child by the river, she was speaking this language and nobody knew what it was. But the village took her under their wing. They taught her the language that they knew. And so Nari grows up in Cairo. In the course of this one particular con, she gets carried away and she speaks a prayer in this other language. And what happens? Well, she summons a jinn warrior. And I thought, ooh, this is gonna get good. The warrior's name is Dara, or his full name is Daryavush. Almost immediately, the two are attacked by ghouls and are forced to flee Cairo. Dara takes Nari to the only safe place he can think of, which is Davabad, a magical city that is hidden from humans. And you can only enter into Davabad if you yourself contain magic. And so you're thinking, oh, this magical city, everyone must get along. No. Davabad, I feel, is more dangerous than the human realm, as Nari soon finds out for herself as she's entered into the society and the different types of magic users are trying to use her to further their agendas. It's so good. And now we get to the cream of the crop, at least in my opinion. And of course, all of these are my opinions. If you've read these books, you might have had completely different reading experiences. But for me, I did not like them in the beginning. I was in love by the end. But the one that had the biggest transformation for me, one of my new favorite books of all time, is An Alchemy of Mask and Mirrors by Curtis Craddock. I honestly thought I was going to DNF it after chapter 1. Yeah, you heard me right. I was going to DNF it after chapter 1. I started out not liking it so much that I thought I would not make it past the first chapter. I expected to DNF it. The story opens up, we're on an airship, and the author is just pelting us with tons of nautical terms that I didn't understand, and there weren't enough context clues for me to even have an idea of what was going on. And I just thought, if this is how this one is written, I'm not going to understand it at all. Add in the French influences to it, and I'm just like going, oh boy. So I went to see if I could get some help by having an audiobook. There was no audiobook. Then I thought, oh dear. So let's just get through chapter 1 and then I'll make the decision. When I tell you this book did a complete turnaround by the end of chapter 1, oh my goodness. This civilization resides on islands that are in the sky, and so to get back and forth, they use airships. Very steampunk-esque. What I love about the French influence, besides the names and just the beauty of the writing, is the king has his own musketeers. And of course, my favorite character here is Jean-Claude, who is a musketeer. He is just the absolute most fantastic character. I just absolutely love him to death. If you're curious to know what it was that changed my mind, we got into the politics of the nobility. And the nobility, the different families, the different bloodlines, have different blood-borne sorcery. And the family we start with, that we get introduced with, is the family of Isabel, whose family has blood shadows. Their shadows are not gray or dark, they're red. And if their shadow touches your shadow, it can fill your shadow up, which will hollow you out. You're just a shell, and they can make you their thrall or even kill you. But they're very dangerous and can cause great pain. And her parents are horrible people, so you can just imagine what they do with this power. And poor Isabel, you learn in the prologue, her mother had a very difficult time conceiving children, and Isabel was born with a deformed hand. And because of that, she has a very, very rough home life. On top of being deformed, she has never manifested her own blood shadow, so her family pretty much shuns her and mistreats her. And the story just simply opens up. She is looking for a way out. Oh boy, but that is not what happens. It's just an amazing story of intrigue, intelligence. It's just, It's so good. I can't wait to continue this trilogy. It is book 1 of the Risen Kingdoms trilogy. By the time this goes up, I might have completed my second trilogy of the year. Who knows? But that concludes the 5 books that I have read over the past few years, where I started the book and I thought I was not going to like it and ended up absolutely loving it and becoming favorites. Have you had that happen to you? If you have, let me know what book or books you've had that happen to you down in the comments. And don't forget, let me know also, how long do you give a book of it not clicking for you before you DNF that sucker? Thank you all so much for joining me here today. I cannot wait for those discussions down in the comments. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one.